Every year I speak to some of the most hardworking, diligent, conscientious students who study for the UCAT and underwhelmingly fail. And this is something that comes completely unexpected to them for the amount of preparation that they've put in. Look, there are so many misconceptions when it comes to the UCAT, and failing in any of these things that I'm gonna be going through in this video could be the difference between you getting that medical offer or not. Hey guys, Archer here, a second year medical student, and on this channel we learn how to learn so we can spend more time on the things and people that matter to us most. Since the UCAT season is almost here, I know a lot of you are actually quite stressed and worried about this particular time getting up to it, and that's kind of how I felt as well. But I wanted to give a lot of advice that I have found that allowed me to not only do well in the UCAT, but also the hundreds of other students that I've been helping out along the way. These things have allowed multiple students to score 99 percentiles, and also myself getting 3 medical school offers as well. To give you guys as much value in this video as I can, we're going to be starting off with the misconceptions of the UCAT. We'll then talk about the power of efficiency, which is, if not the most important thing when it comes to the UCAT, the ideal strategy to get a 99 percentile like the students that I've worked with, and then my personal advice to you. I've been talking to people who are preparing for this year's UCAT, and they've been practicing for 6 months straight, doing lots and lots of preparation, and they still feel that their abilities right now are not much better than they were 4 months ago. This idea of just doing lots of practice to improve is so far from the actual truth. But this is actually because the UCAT is somewhat of an aptitude-based test, but this doesn't mean that you can't prepare for it. There are skills that you can intentionally focus on and work on to get better with all this sort of stuff. But it's not like your knowledge-based subjects in school. So the first thing that I want to talk about is skills versus knowledge. So what do these really mean? Knowledge is about the factual information and theoretical concepts that you can grasp. This is specifically tested in the ATAR, which tests the student's ability to learn content, whereas skill is the ability to apply knowledge to specific scenarios. And this is particularly tested through the UCAT under extreme time pressure to get through some of these questions. So let's talk about two examples. So the first scenario that I have is a doctor. They may have studied every condition and know the drugs of all these different things, but that is their knowledge. However, the doctor is useless if they cannot apply this knowledge to the patient that's in front of them. And that would be because he lacks the particular skills to do that. And another example might be a basketball commentator who knows all the knowledge and all of the strategy about how to do these things. However, that knowledge is actually useless in winning games if they're not actually able to put it into practice. They might actually just lack the skills to do a 3-pointer or a good bounce pass. Here's the thing that I kind of hate to see. Because we are so attached to doing lots of practice questions like we might do for maths, the UCAT preparation companies out there kind of take advantage of this in a way to try and persuade you to buy their product. They might just be advertising how many questions they have, and the most that I've actually seen is 27,000 questions being offered. And this is basically taking advantage of the fact that students think that the more questions you can do, the better you will be. And the funny thing is that this is actually reflected in UK versus Australian and New Zealand UCAT results. The UCAT has been around since 2006 in the UK, where it was only added to Australia and New Zealand in 2019. So in a way that the companies in the UK have had more time to influence the way people perceive questions in the UCAT, to the point where getting Metafy and smashing out tons and tons of questions has become the norm in the UK, and pretty much it's happening in Australia as well. However, here's the most important thing when it comes to the UCAT. Quality over quantity. It is way more important in this test and for many other tests as well. So what are the downsides to doing too many questions? We know that practice makes habits, which means if you're doing lots of practice questions and not actually fixing up on those mistakes, then those flaws within your thinking process approaching these is actually going to become permanent. And it's very, very easy to become complacent with the idea that I'm doing lots of practice questions, so this means that I must be getting better. And here's the thing, you can only realize if that's not working for you after maybe a month or so. And that's a lot of wasted time. And another thing people think as well is that, having this combination of putting lots of time into the UCAT along with investing some money into it as well always leads to a good outcome. It's only a good use of your time, effort, and maybe even money if it's put into the right resource that can actually lead to that good outcome. And frankly, the reason why there are only a particular group of people who actually get the high 90s in the UCAT is because a lot of people make mistakes here. So let's talk about the most important thing in this video, the power of efficiency. So this is really the most important thing when it comes to the UCAT and also for your general studies as well. So why is efficiency important? The UCAT is already as hard as it is, and it's usually put in our last year of schooling. This is a time when assessments are just piling up and there's not really enough time to get everything done. And you're just trying to focus on your normal subjects as well, but that's taking away time from your UCAT preparation. So Do you see what I mean? The power of efficient UCAT preparation means that you would be able to do it in the least amount of time possible so that you can prioritize not only your studies, but the UCAT preparation as well. And this actually means as well that you can have an enjoyable experience in your final year of school because you would be able to have time for other hobbies or things that you like to do. So for me, this was extremely important because I wanted to enjoy year 12 as well. So I would have my UCAT preparation done out of the way. I would have my assignments and tests done by being extremely efficient in terms of study techniques and the way in which I approached the UCAT so that I was always improving and not wasting any extra time. So that meant that I could, meet up with friends on the weekend, go to the events that I wanted to, run online businesses, and actually just enjoy the whole process. So you're probably asking right now, how do I become efficient like that? And kind of what does this look like? So again, it's focusing on your quality and not your quantity. So in the UCAT, this begins straight away with not spamming through practice questions. Ideally, you want to fix up as many mistakes as possible in the least amount of questions. Because once you identify and solve every single mistake that you've been making, that's when you can reach the point of acing, your UCAT mock exams and things. That will allow you to get the scores that get to put you in the top 5 percentiles. So you don't want to be wasting questions and instead using each question and getting as much learning opportunities out of it as possible so that you can identify more mistakes per question. So this kind of follows like exponential growth. So what this means is that in the beginning, it might be slow because you're finding a lot of mistakes and fixing them up. And that takes a lot of time to look into. But with, the improvement that keeps coming, then you'll start to begin to see that exponential growth because no longer do you have to fix up on mistakes. And what's the thing that takes up the most time and reduces your speed in the UCAT? It's about having mistakes in your thinking process so that you have to read the same line again in VR or read the question again. Those things add up over time. So how many questions do you need to do? Well, there's actually no magic number to say. All you need to do is eliminate every single error that happens for you in this preparation process. And really, the number of questions that you might need compared to your friend is really going to differ on how much you're learning per question. So when we compare two students side by side, the student who is more efficient is going to actually end up doing less questions overall. That means that they know what they're doing. If you have another student who's inefficient and they had to do 10,000 questions to reach the same a level of ability as the other efficient person who did 500 questions, we know who's the more efficient learner. And this means that this student can, potentially take their grades to a completely different level and their UCAT scores, right? Because they have more time to play with. So here's the thing, if you're doing the same thing as everyone else around you and just doing question banks or mock exams and stuff like that, how do you really expect to score differently and better if you're doing the exact same thing as everyone else? That's something to definitely think about. And the next thing is learning about how to prioritize. We all have the same amount of time in a day, but we all have different tasks that we need to get to, but there's always too many. So you need to always spend the time on the thing that's most pertinent or important for you at that time. There's no point in you focusing on AR if you're already good at AR. Obviously just focus on VR where you might struggle more so that you can make more improvements there so it doesn't let you down in your UCAT. So if you've heard or seen someone who's able to score really well without doing that much practice questions, the answer for them to be able to do that is because they've built that level of efficiency. So let's break down the ideal strategy to get a 99th percentile in the UCAT. Remember how I said the UCAT is not a knowledge-based exam like you might prepare for a bio or chemistry exam. This is why the approach is completely different. So the main thing again is that you need to be intentional for looking for these mistakes and flaws. So before you go ahead and smash out some practice questions, think about the goal that you have that you want to achieve. Maybe that might be introducing yourself to a new question type inside of decision making. When you get something wrong, don't be lazy by just checking the answer, understanding it and moving on. That's actually considered lazy. Think about the way in which you've prepared for some question like that and retrace your thoughts in why you justified each answer that you put down and where that could have been improved. You specifically have to retrace and track the single, thought or action that you took that might need some tweaking, that logical reasoning that led you to choosing the wrong answer. And then you have to go about making a very good strategy to fix up on that. So that's a lot easier said than done. And this is actually something that takes time to learn as well. So here's the thing, and this makes sense, right? Like if you don't figure out specifically where that mistake has come from and specifically how to fix it, well, then it's just going to sneak into your next question and cause the error that you have. So within your preparation and taking the time to, develop these things over time, well, then you're going to need to think about, the marginal gains that you can make within each study session. If you're finding that you're rereading passages of text again and again, you just need to work on your comprehension. And so you find a specific point about what is causing you to forget that line. Is it your speed that you're going through it? Is it the particular words and not understanding some of these things? You gotta find something really super specific so you can try something new. And then you practice that until you can solve, that one specific issue, and then you go on to the next. These things over time are what add up to that exponential growth. And with an exam like the UCAT that's highly time pressured, you need a lot of fixing to be consistently at that sort of speed. And if you're going through your preparation right now and you're finding that your results are going up and down all of the time, well, that's a sign that something isn't quite right. It's an indicator that there are some mistakes with some particular questions that you're seeing. The thing is when it comes to the things like the UCAT as well, it's not like the person who gets a 99 percentile has this new magic trick or technique that allows them to solve questions better than anyone else. It's just that they have a technique and they have mastered it completely. Obviously the technique as well has to be legitimate. So something like VR, just like looking out for strong words and avoiding them because they're strong, is not really a technique. While something looking at specifically the key functional words within a passage in VR and understanding what does that mean between the relationship of this object versus that object, that's really a strategy that you want. So you really have to familiarize yourself with developing these key skills rather than familiarizing yourself just with every single question that can potentially pop up, because there's too many questions that can pop up. And also, if you're developing a skill, it's very hard for you to forget this over time. So for example, once you learn the skill to ride a bike, you remember it for pretty much forever. It's the same thing. I can still answer UCAT questions after not doing it for a few years. It's very easy to pick up from where I just left off. Whereas if I was just memorizing some stuff for, that biology test, well then those definitions, I'm just gonna forget completely. The idea is that it's hard to lose skills. Okay, so let's talk about my personal advice to you guys. The number one people that everyone's going to say to you when preparing for the UCAT is to start as early as possible. Because if you don't, other people are going to do it. So they're going to have the advantage. Now, prep doesn't mean buying a 2-year Metafire subscription and doing the questions from there. It can begin by educating yourself about what the UCAT really is and what it really takes to do well in it. A lot of people ask about what I specifically did. And after looking at all of the UCAT prep companies, obviously coming in with a level of skepticism about this sort of thing, the one that I ended up choosing was UCAT, specifically because I knew this sort of thing about practice questions and everyone just loving doing them. And I know that it doesn't work because of the study techniques with maths. This is one of the reasons that I ended up choosing them. It's much more than just question banks, and you're actually learning the theory and the learning and the logical process that goes into having a step-by-step method to apply for any particular question type that you might see in the UCAT. It provides you with all the necessary resources that you actually need to develop some of these skills in the UCAT. And they also have this thing like, it's kind of like the Genius Bar that you get at Apple, where you're always able to answer a question and get a response in, guaranteed 24 hours. So in a way, I kind of had UCAT mentoring in that way because I always had someone there that could ask questions about, specific to the problems that I was facing when, tackling any of these question types, because the UCAT's genuinely hard. And that's what really matters, right? Is having the individualized support for the things that you're currently facing and the problems that you need to overcome. This was really a game changer for me because even though I was figuring out all of these mistakes for myself, I couldn't specifically figure out the exact solutions that I needed to overcome them. And instead of just watching a lot of the UCAT videos out there to try and figure out what was going on, I was just able to ask someone personally and get that feedback. And I think everything here is ultimately why I'm in this position now where I was able to do well in the UCAT and get these medical school offers. And I think it's the same thing for the friends that I know who were with me as well, that this was the reason that we kind of got in. And you don't necessarily have to believe me because this is the things that I found. And not only this, there was literally 700, I think, students just last year that were from UCAT that scored in the 90th percentile or higher, which is basically just over 50% of all the people who got a 90th percentile last year as well. And in fact as well, UCAT literally accounted for 70% of the people who scored from the 96th percentile to the 99th, which is just crazy on its own. And I just checked it up that last year alone, there were 300 iChem Med students who actually received, medicine and dental offers. Now, if you guys are interested in getting some free value from these guys, then I've got some links in below so you can start checking this stuff out. And this is where it all began for me, just getting myself educated on the UCAT and then making a decision from there. And they're always teaching stuff for free in the webinars, which is where I began. So, on the 30th of June, there's going to be something for people in Australia and New Zealand. And on the 27th of June, there's going to be something for people in the UK as well. And if you're extremely keen on learning some of this theory and how to tackle each of these things, then they do have courses for this next UCAT cycle. So for Australia and New Zealand, they already have a heavily discounted course at $170, and it's £90 for people in the UK. And because I also want to help out you guys who are interested in this sort of thing, I've also talked to them and they've managed to let me give you guys a $5 discount just for using my code as well. And if you want to use this, make sure to just use Archer5 when you're checking out. So I've made a lot of other UCAT videos developing on some of these ideas just because I hate seeing people do the same thing and fail at the UCAT. So make sure to check that out if you're interested in any of this stuff. And I also have a new Discord channel where I'm talking to more of you guys and getting some feedback and answering more of your questions. So make sure to check that out. All right, thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.